Africa today is a continent in transition. Democratic and economic reforms are underway throughout the continent, creating new opportunities for profitable investment and hope for Africa's future. It was to promote and strengthen these trends that the African Business Roundtable, ABR, recently convened in Abidjan with leading figures in business, government, and non-governmental entities from Africa and abroad. The occasion was the third annual general meeting of the ABR. The ABR is Africa's leading and first continent-wide business organization. Comprised of chief executive officers of Africa's top corporations, the ABR was founded to strengthen Africa's private sector, to promote intra-African trade and investment, and to attract foreign investment to Africa.
ABR is definitely a unique organization. It had been created by the will of the private businessmen in Africa. We all believe of the private initiative. It is the only way to help our continent, to help ourselves, and to help our businesses, to help our countries.
It is unique because it's the first of its type and the only one of its type in the continent. You have chambers of commerces, they're regionalized. You have other organizations, they're regionalized. This is the one that takes the whole continent.
ABR annual general meetings provide a unique forum for dialogue on strategies to strengthen and integrate Africa's economies through an enhanced role for private enterprise. In his opening address to the meeting, ABR chairman and founder, Dr. Babacar Njai, emphasized that a close and collaborative partnership must form the cornerstone of Africa's new private sector-led development strategy, essential to Africa's development and emerging democracies.
First, it's a partnership between business and government whose cornerstones are frank and open dialogue, mutual trust, and concerted action. Second, it's a partnership between African businesses and counterparts abroad, who through mutually beneficial joint ventures and trade, tap into and develop Africa's limitless potential. Third, it is a partnership among African businesses which defy political boundaries with their investment to make the Pan-African markets and economy a reality.
The Secretary General of the ABR, Mr. Essa Malinta, echoed the theme of partnership and responded on behalf of African business.
The reality is that the opportunities for profitable business in Africa have never been better. My colleagues and I, in the African Business Roundtable, can say this with the conviction of our experiences. Our goal is to move Africa from dependence to self-reliance, from handouts to mutually beneficial relationships.
Throughout the two-day meeting, delegates deliberated in roundtable discussions on the environment for private enterprise in Africa, the successes, the setbacks, and strategies to meet the challenges that remain. Business leaders emphasized the fundamental elements needed for a sound investment climate.
I believe that there are so many things that attract investors. Stability of the political regime, stability of law, quick decision of court, and honest decision of court.
Delegates also stressed the importance of a stable macroeconomic framework.
Nearly all African governments decided, for some reason, that they were the only custodians of people's welfare. They decided to get involved in all major economic activities rather than concentrating on what they were supposed to do best, and which is simply to maintain law and order and create conditions where other people will engage in production.
Mr. Bakary Debo, Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs of the Gambia, outlined the free market-oriented policy framework that the Gambia implemented in the 1980s, the direct result of lessons learned.
We count among those countries that started by making many mistakes. Up till the early 1980s, we took pride in describing our economic setup as one of mixed economy. But in reality, there was very little that was being done to promote the private sector in a consistent manner. And like many other African countries, along the line, we of course discovered very soon that in fact that is the wrong way to proceed.
Dr. Kwesi Bachwe, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning for Ghana, said that after experiencing unprecedented levels of decline, Ghana in 1982 put in place the right macroeconomic environment, which resulted in increased private investment and economic growth.
I believe that the experience of Ghana and a number of African countries, West African countries, suggests quite clearly that provided we do the right things, it is possible to have a turnaround.
Mr. Daniel Cablin-Duncan, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning for Côte d'Ivoire, outlined Côte d'Ivoire's liberal foreign investment policy and its move to further liberalize its investment code, reduce the price of raw materials, power costs, export premiums, and taxes on tourism.
L'absence de restrictions sur les échanges extérieurs et sur les mouvements de capitaux, la convertibilité et la stabilité de la monnaie, des débouchés en croissance ont contribué à créer un climat propice aux affaires.
The meeting produced frank assessments of what more remains to be done, as well as evidence that African governments are firmly committed to continuing the reform process.
What we must not do is to be complacent. I think this is a very dynamic situation which must be kept constantly under review. We have to keep on progressively deepening the reforms.
Charlene Hunter-Gault, national correspondent for the U.S. television news program McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour, chaired a panel discussion on business prospects in Southern Africa, a region central to the new partnership. During the discussion, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, Secretary for International Affairs of the African National Congress of South Africa, said it was expected that elections should take place in South Africa by the end of 1993 and no later than 1994.
I think there is a general spirit of hope in the country that before the year is out, you would have a completely different government in South Africa. The sort of government which the rest of the world joined hands to say needs to be created.
Mr. Mbeki added that the ABR would serve as an important mechanism of cooperation between South Africa and African businesses.
It clearly would be an important partner with regard to various business organizations that exist in South Africa.
ABR member Andrew Sardanis, chairman and CEO of the Zambia-based ITM International SA, discussed the burgeoning possibilities for business opportunities in the region.
The way I look at the situation in South Africa is that it will certainly help a great deal in the trade, particularly in the southern region of Africa, and subsequently in the rest of Africa.
The South African economy, and as a result also the region's economy, has been greatly distorted during the apartheid era. Therefore, there exists a very obvious need for a process of fundamental economic restructuring. The positive aspect about this is, however, that this restructuring process will bring with it substantial business prospects.
In what marked an important watershed for the ABR, the General Assembly voted to create new categories for corporate and associate membership to allow businesses from abroad to formally join the partnership network of the ABR. For businesses abroad, the ABR offers a credible source of information on African investment conditions, as well as access to reliable local partners and larger markets.
The African Business Roundtable really is the heart of the private sector in Africa. And people don't do business with countries. They don't do business with governments. They don't do business with continents. People do business with people. And at the African Business Roundtable, you meet the successful business people of Africa. And if you want to enter into a joint venture, you know that in the African Business Roundtable, these are men and women of proven business success.
The African Business Roundtable represents a pool of talent and capital, and as such represents a pool of potential business partners for American companies that are seeking investment opportunities on the continent.
The African Development Bank's new Private Sector Development Unit, the first initiative of the ABR, provides an important means of finance for new partnerships. The PSDU provides direct ADB financing to African private enterprise in the form of equity participation and term loans.
As it is the case today, one pharmaceutical plant in Swaziland is a project, joint venture between American firm, Nigerian firms, and Swazi partners. We believe that if we have multiplication of this kind of ventures, we will make African business people, African economies more interlinked.
Overall, the deliberations were characterized by a decided tone of optimism, a reflection of the fact that positive changes are the order of the day.
We do have the ability to change our environment and people's attitudes and get investment.
I think the climate for investment in Africa is wonderful. Most people think about Africa as Somalia, and they never think of Ivory Coast. Our company, Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners in Africa, has operated in Africa for 40 years, and we've turned a profit every year. And we're expanding our investments in Africa.
The major objective, among others, objective of ABR is to project a different image of Africa. An image of successful Africa, an image of successful men and women in business, an image of business of the continent. Because it's the voice of our business, ABR has undertaken to speak in favor of business in the continent and also outside of the continent, to be the ambassadors of African business.
The annual general meeting of the ABR was an important milestone in ABR's goal to build close collaborative relationships with African governments and businesses.
The Ghana government supports the African Business Roundtable because it does fulfill a need which we have felt for a very long time. They need to have a common forum where businessmen from all over the world would come together with African government officials and others and discuss business opportunities, economic incentives, issues that affect the private sector.
With so many countries in Africa making the transition from whatever state they're in to democracy, it is important to have a group of people who have stability, who have vision, and who are prepared to move on that vision. And when you look at the program of the Africa Business Roundtable and its potential, it's quite impressive.
At the close of the third annual general meeting, it was clear that the African Business Roundtable has emerged as an important instrument to bolster the forces of reform and to build a more prosperous and democratic future for Africa.
We have thoroughly appreciated the meetings here. We've been able to learn a lot about the workings of the private sector in Africa, of which we are part, but also make very useful business contacts and connections which I think will be invaluable in our future business.